Sweet. Awesome.
You talking on here or on stream? Oh, I see what you're talking about. Yeah. That works.
Sounds good. Oualline, do you guys have a spring break?
Yeah, it's actually next week.
Yeah, ours is this upcoming week as well.
Yeah, they've got all their midterm projects due this week, so chaos.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that as well. I've been keeping up with Ethan, and yeah, he sounds tired.
No rest for the weary at art school.
Yeah, definitely not. I do not envy him.
They're doing some amazing stuff, though, that's for sure.
Hello.
Art and design. Good deal. Yeah, yeah. If you could just, if it's set up to where I can share my screen, I'll pop on.
Yeah, if you the quickest way to do is to end yours and then make him a co-host. Yeah.
All right. Good deal. Let me get this pulled up. All right. So, thank you, Grant, for the introduction. Very happy to be here with you guys. I was asked quite some time ago by Ashley to come talk to you guys about scope. Um, I agreed, and then I thought, scope. What does that even mean? Right? Are we talking about dental hygiene? Um, Humor me. I'm a dad. I have dad jokes. But of course not. You guys are all overworked, underpaid college students in the middle of a global pandemic where most of you are probably, working or taking classes from home. So hygiene is probably not on the high list of priorities at the moment. But no, seriously. In all seriousness, let's talk about project scope, right? Scoping within games and the game industry and how does that work? According to Moira Alexander, she wrote an article for CIO, Chief Information Officer.com about project scope, and she detailed out this entire definition. Right, project scope is a detailed outline of all aspects of a project, including all related activities, resources, timelines, deliverables, as well as all the boundaries for the project. A project scope also outlines the key stakeholders, processes, assumptions, constraints. So, as well as all the, everything that's included and not included in the project. All of that's essential, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. It's a definition. It's a mouthful. Oh my gosh, seriously. You guys can look up definitions on your own. That's not why I'm here. Let's actually talk about what it is. How do you approach it? How does it work in the industry versus how does it work in a school project versus, a high school project versus wherever you guys end up working in the industry, hopefully, whether it be in software development or games. But before I kind of move any further, kind of want to give a little bit about my background and probably why I was asked to come talk to you guys tonight instead of somebody else. So I started out my career in education about 20 years ago after I graduated from Texas A&M University. I know, boo, hiss, we're rivals and all. It's all good. We're all ending up at the same studio, so you're gonna have to work together eventually. But the vast majority of those 20 years, I taught graphic design, animation, and game design at the high school level. And that's obviously where Ashley met me. She had several of my classes back in high school. Back in 2015, though, I decided that I wanted to go back to graduate school, learn a little bit more about the subjects that I was teaching. So as I'm going through the process and trying to find the right school, the right program, do I want to go for animation? Do I want to go for game design? Honestly, at the time, I wasn't really sure. But PSA in that, never stop learning. Keep doing what you're doing as long as you can do it, and always to be better. when I was going through that process, the one of the professors over at A&M in their visualization department introduced me to the chair of the graduate program out at LCAD. As grant, said LCAD stands for Laguna College of Art and Design. And so, after meeting her, we kind of hit it off immediately. So I chose to go for game design in the LCAD program. And so from August of 2016 all the way through May of 2018, I was pretty much a zombie as I balanced my full-time job of high school teaching and, being a husband and a dad with this grueling new workload of this accelerated MFA program. Laguna LCAD is basically housed in Laguna Beach, California. And so we're right in the heart of Orange County, which is just south of LA County. Our area is pretty much the central hub of the gaming industry and where we're located. There are probably about 36 different studios within 10 to 15 miles of our campus. I drive within about a block and a half of Obsidian and Blizzard on my way to work. We have lots of different industry relationships with all of these different companies, and about 90% of our faculty are current leaders at those studios. After I graduated back in 2018, I started teaching remotely for that graduate program that I had just finished. I graduated in May, and they said, "Hey, come back and teach for us in August." And so that was an interesting development. But I was still living back in Texas. I was still actually teaching at the high school level, but at night I would teach an adjuncted class for LCAD. Later that fall, the actual chair of Game Art, Gavin Rich, who hired me at one point, was in Texas at Chilenium at Texas A&M, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. They had a group that was competing at Chilenium. They were there, we were hanging out, and he floated this idea of me teaching for him full time in the LCAD program. And I was like, "You're funny." I just kind of laughed it off and blew it off because there was no reason I would move to California. Right? I lived in Texas my entire life. I had a pretty, decent job. I didn't mind it at all. But I had been kind of interviewing at the collegiate level, thinking about moving from the high school up to the college. So I kind of blew that off, interviewed with several different universities and colleges, kind of all over the nation, upstate New York, Texas, South Carolina, California. Had a handful of offers, and by the time it was said and done, the family and I kind of decided to that LCAD was the right place. I moved out to Southern California. I started full time out here at LCAD back in August of 2019. And so this past summer, mid-pandemic, my boss at the time, Gavin Rich, decided he wanted to go back to the industry full time. And so he left to go back and work at Broken Circle Studios as one of their 3D artists, and kind of handed the reins of the program over to me. So now I run one of the top 20 game programs in the nation. And a lot of that, and why we are so well acclaimed, is because we have an absolutely amazing faculty, and we have about a 90% placement rate for our graduates, which is pretty unheard of for game programs. So in preparation for tonight, I reached out to some of my amazing faculty and friends and asked them basically, "Hey, if you were to give a presentation over scope, what are some of the key points that you would hit? What would you talk about? How would you go about it?" And so this presentation is basically a culmination of what I already wanted to talk to you guys about, but then also what these guys, chimed in with their 2 cents. And so Daniel Alpert, he's the current art director at Obsidian. They just released Outer Worlds, doing amazing, cool things, and now he's working on an unannounced project. Don Ott, who owns 3D Motive, if any of you guys have ever looked up 3dmotive.com, it's an online, game art kind of tutorial workspace. And he's been in the industry for 20 plus years, but he's currently a lead prop and environment artist over at Amazon. Casey Dockendorf, who's an art director down at Redemption Games. has worked at, several other studios throughout his time. Jeff Parrott, senior art manager over at Blizzard, he's on the WoW team. And Tom Olson, who's currently at Broken Circle, but before that was at Backflip and Insomniac and has done some other stuff. So, this is this kind of a culmination of all that we kind of assembled and put together. But we all know the first step to any project is to grossly underestimate its complexity and difficulty, right? That's always the first thing we do, is we always think it's so much easier than what it's actually going to be. This statement is entirely too accurate. Determining a project scope in all reality is almost impossible. The more innovative, or the more new a project is, or the younger a team is, it's even harder, right? Because you don't know each other yet. You don't know how you're going to work together. You don't know how your skill sets are going to complement each other. And so let's really kind of talk about what it is and why it's important before we attempt to kind of dissect it and figure out how we need to attempt to tackle it. So first of all, let's kind of look at what is it, right? In its most basic sense, it's literally everything that needs to be done in order to deliver a product with specified features and functionality, right? And I say deliver, to deliver a project, right? And we'll get back to that later on. But we have to begin by planning out our product, right? And we have to plan it out as good as we possibly can. Once we have that plan, now we have to control the scope, right? As we move through production, we don't want to get bogged down with feature creep, right? And I guarantee you, I know all of you know what feature creep is. I'm sure all of your professors have spoken to feature creep at one point or another, because it's a constant thing that we have to battle. But then we also have to close out by reviewing or doing retrospects of the deliverable against what our original plan was. And so this is this cyclical process in games, right? It's a very iterative process. And it happens with every development cycle, and no two studios do this exactly the same. And so it's hard to say like, oh, this is the way it's going to be, because every studio is going to handle it a little different. But the next question is, why is it so important, right? This is by far one of the most ridiculously important aspects of the pre-production process. Getting your project scope is extremely important. The more your team plans and answers before production actually begins, the smoother that production is going to go. That is 100% accurate. The more you can plan, the smoother the production will be. Will you run into things? Obviously, right? So it's important for you to know that no amount of planning, literally no amount of planning, is going to prepare you for all of the unknown issues that comes with game development or software development or anything in that development process, really. I once heard one of the producers at Naughty Dog describe all of the obstacles that you face during the process as the things you know, the things you don't know, and the things you don't even know that you don't know yet, right? We don't even know the problems that we're going to run into, so how in the world could we mitigate them? And so we're never going to be able to plan and prepare for every aspect of development, but you can plan and prepare so much that your team will be more efficient and better prepared for the surprises when they do happen, because they, in all reality, will happen. You will have them pop up. So we'll continue to kind of discuss why this is so important as we kind of dive deeper into the presentation. And I'll be honest, I'm going to try to keep the presentation pretty short, because I want to leave time for questions and answers at the end, because I think that's really where we kind of get to the meat of it and answer and really kind of come to the realization of what we're trying to do. So once our team, comes to this realization, I apologize, my cat has decided to join us. Once your team kind of comes to the realization that the project is going to be a lot bigger and a lot more challenging than you initially thought it was going to be, really the most important thing for you to do is to define your MVP. What am I talking about here? What is the MVP? Anybody have any ideas? Are we talking about, most valuable player in the the league, or what? I'm sure you guys have heard the MVP before. Oh, let me pull up my chat. I just saw it ping. Yes, good deal. Okay, minimum viable product, right? That is by far one of the more important things that you have to do early on in the process. What is going to be our MVP, right? This is the least amount of work you can do to achieve the most of what you aim to accomplish, right? The least amount we can do to achieve the most that we want to accomplish. A key principle behind the idea of your MVP is that you produce an actual product, right? It's not a theory anymore. We're actually producing a product. It may not be any more than a simple prototype or a vertical slice that has the functionality and the features that you want to give to the player, right? But you're developing this product that you can offer to customers and then observe their actual behavior with the product, right? Not asking them, what would you do with this product? But hey, here is the product. Now, what are you doing with it? And let me watch you see. Let me see how you're interacting with it. We need to see what they actually do with with respect to the product, and that's a lot more reliable than just asking them. This gives you just a completely different level of insight into whether or not the product's even worth developing fully, right? Is it worth the time and the effort that it's going to be to create this project? And a lot of games never even make it, past this point. Hell, I mean, if we're being honest, a lot of games never even make it to this point, right? So once we've defined our MVP, we need to start building out that product backlog. And so I'm assuming I'm around, some relatively intelligent people. We're at UT. So who can tell me what the product backlog is? You can talk, I promise. I'm not scary. Anybody? Products backlog? Not even in the chat? All right. So basically our product backlog is a list of all of the items. So we're going to develop a list of everything that we need or want for the final project. And then we're going to work with our team to estimate how long is it going to take for each task to be completed, right? And a lot of places they'll talk to you about, oh, we're going to do, a Fibonacci sequence of, estimating the effort that it would take to do these tasks. But in reality, in the real world, in the industry, you're going to have to figure out actual, tangible, productive man hours, right? We need to focus on the actual man hours it takes versus this, some kind of sensed overhyped estimate, right? In the industry, in all reality, you're going to assume you can typically count on about 5 hours of solid productive work per day. So in the span of an 8-hour work day, between meetings, lunch breaks, this, that, whatever, you can assume that your employees are probably going to have about 5 solid hours of production. And so if you know that going into it, once we've figured this is our product backlog, these are all of the things that need to be done, then now we can really figure out and identify if all of our tasks that we plan on doing fit into our timeline, right? Now we can set that into a Gantt chart and kind of figure out, okay, does this work? And then take a bigger step back, and is our budget going to allow for this, right? Because that's when it's all said and done. We have timelines, we have budgets, those are our resources. And so those are all things that we have to be able to work around and make sure that we understand. It's important to start with the end in mind. What do I mean by that? In addition to determining our MVP, we need to have a clear vision of what our final product is going to look like when it's actually delivered to our client. Obviously, in this case, what we're talking about tonight is games. So your player audience, what's it going to look like when it's delivered to them? And I'm not just talking about the software itself. I'm talking about, is this a mobile game? What console or what hardware are we building to? What type of, engine are we going to be using? What is it going to end up being when the player's actually having a tangible controller or a phone in their hand engaging with our product? So we have to know that end before we can ever really start. Having a clear vision of our end product is going to allow us or your team kind of to work backwards, which again allows us to better calculate the number of resources needed in order to develop this product, right? Again, time, man hours, hardware, software, all of those things that we have to kind of take into consideration on whether or not this is actually going to be a marketable product, a profitable product. So as I mentioned earlier, it's extremely important to kind of document a clear, specific list of exactly what we're planning for. In the game industry, it's really impossible to go to a producer with a loose estimate the further along the project goes. When you're first starting out and everything is still kind of conceptual, you're going to have some of those more loose estimates that are kind of allowed and kind of work. But as the project continues, and as production kind of swings, you should have a complete list of exactly what you're developing for each iterative cycle. And so I'm sure you guys in the computer science department have talked about iterative design, or talked about Kanban boards, or sprint development, and all of those things. I'm sure you've all heard all of that stuff, but it's extremely important that every sprint be, every iterative cycle be completely planned, so that every person on your team knows exactly what they're working on, why they're working on that, when it's due, and how is it due, right? What is the actual deliverable for that team? Does it have to be delivered in engine, or does it have to be delivered, if it's just an actual model going to, now it's going to the rigger in the next phase? Well, maybe they don't need the model to actually be an engine, but now that the rigger and the animator have it, well, their deliverable is going to be in engine, because we need to make sure that character's cycles are actually working in engine, whatever that engine be. And so having that complete list, knowing exactly what you're doing every iterative cycle, is going to be extremely important. It's even better if we're able to create a blockout of it. Not just have the actual thing itself, but have it blocked out. We need to block out everything that we possibly can, right? Models, textures, visual effects, animations, feature functionality. If you can build it into a game, it needs to be tried. You need to try and block it out at its first pass. Nothing gives a team a clearer roadmap than seeing everything visually on the first pass. Conceptually, we can talk about things, but how Mason sees something versus how Rue sees something versus how Ashley sees something, they might all be visualizing something else. And so for the main person to be able to kind of throw something together in a block out form, this is not polished by any means, but some type of blocked out form. Now everybody can be on the same page, and we're all working, we're all rowing in the same direction. And so that's what's going to help us kind of shoot for, a more tangible target, and it's really going to help us to achieve our goals. So once your team has a solid idea of the MVP and a complete inventory to start working through the iterative process, we need to be aware of feature creep. Make sure that everything is always focused back on that MVP, right? As we're talking about, oh, well, what if we wanted to do this? Or, oh, no, if we did this instead, then now, you're going to start working on that favorite sandwich where everybody's putting something on the sandwich, and by the time it gets to the end, nobody wants to eat it because it's just a horrific mess of everything, and none of the flavors actually work well together. And so you want to make sure that you're paying attention to, again, that original plan, that original design. How does this go back to the basic user experience that we started with, right? That is the same question you need to consistently ask yourself through the process. Okay. So Don Ott, one of the names that I mentioned earlier, he always discusses with his teams at work and with his students here at LCAD about the paintbrush approach, right? We want to start with the giant buckets we splash on the walls. Then we're going to move to the roller brush and kind of, give it some form. From there, we're going to go to the chip brush. And then, eventually we're going to get to the tiny little micro brush that we use to, really bring in the finer detail. And he uses that analogy to, discuss the workflow of a project. And it's the same thing with kind of developing your scope. What are the big things that you need to focus first on? What are the main features? What are the main environments? Don't worry about the details yet. Like, let's get the actual functional piece together and see if it's even worth defining. It's the same kind of analogy that I'm sure we've all heard of. The professor walks in with these different things of, he's got the rocks and the pea gravel and the sand and the water, and he's like, how much can I fit in this one jar, right? And if I put all the sand in first, well, none of the big rocks are going to fit, but if I put the big stuff in first, if I put the big rocks and then pour the pea gravel and shake it around, and they'll fill all the holes, and then I can pour the sand and shake some more, and it'll fill the holes, and then the water, and so everything will eventually fit in that. It's the same thing with production, right? We've got to focus on the big stuff first, make sure that those big things fit, make sure that they work, make sure the functionality is there, and that the game is actually leaning towards the experience that we want the players to have. And once we have those big pieces in place, now we can really start focusing on the theme and focusing on the artwork and what it's going to look like. And, really kind of getting more into the nitty gritty of the level design and talking about composition of the nodes within your level. This is all an iterative process. We create that first feature in a very basic environment, and we make sure it's in engine and working, right? Is our main feature engaging? We always want to prioritize our backlog and make sure that we're working on the next most important thing, right? I work with a bunch of artists, so they always want to make it pretty first. And so sometimes that's great and wonderful. And some people, that's what they do, but they need to, we always have to kind of get back and say, hey, let's make sure it's right before we make it pretty. And they have to go through and do the same passes on theirs, right? I'm going to block out the scene and make sure that my composition works before I really dive into the textures and the special effects and everything else that's going to go into that environment. And so what's the most important thing that we need to focus on next? You need to make sure that it's functional in engine before you move on to the next iteration, right? With every new iteration, we need to review, right? And have that retrospective, what worked, what didn't work, why did it not work? Are we still true to, our original design? And if not, why? And sometimes it's fine that we're not true to our original design. Sometimes, we have a better idea in the production process. We're like, oh my gosh, it would be great if we could potentially do this. And you just made the game 10 times better. But again, we have to be able to fine line balance between that feature creep, what is good and what is bad, right? And I'm not telling you guys, I'm probably not telling you anything you haven't heard before. But, we definitely can't wait until we have everything done to start testing the process. That's bad. We definitely don't want to do that. Test as often as you can, internally and externally, right? So this is, why we work iteratively. We need to be play testing internally consistently, right? You guys have you guys have a great advantage over us as an art school because you have a bunch of computer science people that can program the crap out of these features and really, be able to get that stuff in engine early and really kind of play around with it. Does the feature work? Is this fun? Is the control actually, does it feel good or does it feel clunky? Like that's a lot easier for you guys to do than us here at an art school, right? We partner with art schools. We partner with USC and UCI and a bunch of other programs that have that stuff. But we only have a couple scripting classes because, and most of those are more to the technical art side. And so, but you want to test as often as you possibly can, as early as you possibly can. If you're just talking about individual features, you're going to be doing those internal tests. But once you have a build of the actual main like core game loop, that's the soonest you need to get it out to other people. Like don't let somebody in, you're going to be constantly internally, but get other people to come in and test it. And get people you don't know. Don't get your roommate that doesn't want to hurt your feelings. Don't get your, family members that are just, oh, you're so impressive and you do awesome, amazing things. Get the people that are going to actually say, dude, this sucks. Like, why are you even making this game? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here? And make them ask the hard questions, and you're going to have to answer them, and you're going to have to justify them. Be true and honest with yourself, right? But review and test every iteration, right? Is the game as engaging as we thought it was going to be, right? Is the user experience true to what our initial idea was? I typically, tell my game design students, every decision you make needs to go back to, the king pole. For thinking about like a big circus tent, right? You have the one king pole that holds everything else up and everything else kind of supports that system. Does that fit back to that main initial UX decision you made? What is the experience you're going for? Is it a family friendly experience? Is it a horror game? Is it this? Is it that? What was the main experience that you initially started out with? Every decision needs to fuel that piece and that feature. But yeah, I mean, once you have an initial, prototype, put that hideous, crappy looking prototype in somebody else's hands and say, don't look at how pretty it is. How does it feel, right? Is it actually engaging? Are they enjoying it? Are they getting confused? They don't know where to go. I don't know what to do, right? Those are all things that you need to be figuring out. But now we're talking more about production than scope. So let's kind of refocus and get back to where we're supposed to be, right? The problem is, so often they're working in tandem, right? In order to really properly scope your game, though, you need to start out with that honest assessment. You and your team have to be realistically honest with yourselves, and even brutally honest with yourselves before you start the production process. How many people do you have, right? How much time can each one of those people actually commit per week to work on development? What is, a realistic timeline for the actual project itself? Do you have access to the hardware you need? Do you have the software you need, right? Or is it only on a campus computer? Some of these softwares are stupid expensive. You look at somebody that's trying to do 3D sculpture in ZBrush, and it's, at its cheapest, $800. Not all of you college students have $800 to throw at ZBrush, so are you just using the campus computers? And so, think through, what do you have access to, and how, when and where are you going to have that access? Do you have access year round? Do you only have access while you're taking that class? So on and so forth, right? And so all of those things have to be kind of thought through. And, remember, like, Nicole Hunt said, the top of the presentation, the first step of any project is to grossly underestimate its complexity and difficulty. This is one of the main reasons that development is so hard, right? We tend to overestimate our abilities. Pretty much all of us tend to overestimate our own abilities. And our resources, right? We don't think it's going to take as many resources as it actually does. The more you do this, the better you'll get at estimating that. Once a team has worked together for a while, then they'll be even better at knowing what they are and are not capable of. But it's also important to keep in mind the next 3 facts that I'm going to share with you. Number 1, when it comes to games, when your deadline hits, it's way better to have 100% of your game at 75% than it is to have 75% of your game at 100%. So again, iterate, build the entire thing. Once it's built, once you've play tested, once you've made those adjustments, now go polish, now go refine, do the all 100% again, and now go again. And every pass again, and that's why in games we see like, oh, here's the alpha version, here's the beta version. You know, once you have an alpha, that's everything feature complete, right? Everything's there. It doesn't look great. There's still a hell of a lot of bugs, you know, but we need it out there. We need people playing with it. We need their feedback so that we can make it better. And then now we have the beta. And then, you know, oh, well, here's number 2. Games are never finished. Never. No game in the history of games has it ever been finished. It was shipped, right? Time ran out, resources ran out, they shipped it. We see it all the time. Back in the day, it was horrible. Now they can just update it live and it's no big deal, right? Or hey, here's this, you know, let's talk about Modern Warfare. Here's another 20 gig patch. Have fun. And so it's always one thing after another, right? But that's what you have to understand. You're never gonna actually finish a game. You're going to finish a game to the point where it's good enough to give out. It's good enough to charge people money for now. That's the industry. It sucks, but that's reality. And then finally, number 3, you know, every teacher, every mentor that you will ever have, no matter where you work or no matter where you're going to school, can absolutely rip a new one in their own portfolio, right? And so as you're getting feedback from professors and you're potentially getting ripped a new one about this, or this was a really stupid thing you did, or why did you do this? This is ridiculously inefficient. I could do this 10 different ways that's more efficient than what you just did. Realize that they can do that same thing to every single thing they've ever done in their past. Because every time you do something new, it's going to be better and more efficient than the previous version. And these guys have been doing it a heck of a lot longer than you have. So no, eventually 20 years from now, you're going to be doing the same thing to somebody else that's currently in your shoes, right? So don't take it personally. Be able to separate your work from yourself, right? They're typically, I don't know all the UT professors, obviously, but they're typically not bashing you, they're bashing the work, right? And they're only doing it to make sure that you know that you can do it better, because it can't always be done better. And here I am in an art school, so art is never done. You know, with programming, yes, it could potentially be more efficient. You could do it this way or that way, but with art, it's never done. It can always be better. You can always do a new pass. Somebody's going to see something and point something out like, oh my God, I would have never even noticed that. But you know, if this were easy, you know, making games is freaking hard. Like, it's beyond hard, actually. So I mean, if this were easy, everybody'd do it, right? And every single game would be a hit. We'd all be millionaires, right? We'd do our little, you know, indie game and we'd throw it out there and we'd automatically make $1 million and we'd be able to retire for the rest of our lives. Yeah, it's just not reality. So know that, you know, all I need you guys to do is keep failing gloriously, right? Keep pushing your nose to the grindstone and doing as many little projects as you possibly can. And try to finish, like actually try to complete something. Again, it's not going to be finished, but it'll be good enough to actually say, hey, I'm gonna post this somewhere. I'm gonna post it up on IO or whatever. But do as many possible projects as you possibly can. Scope wise, though, scope is a monster that no one will ever actually tackle. And it doesn't matter how long you've been in the industry. It doesn't matter how good you are and how many projects you've been on. You're always going to underestimate your scope. It sucks, but that's why you have producers that are constantly making you stay on task and hit your timelines and everything else. That's our job as professors right now. But once you get in the industry, it's going to be those producers that are trying to be really friendly, but in all reality, they're cracking the whip at the same time. Like, hey, this needed to be done 2 days ago. You're screwing so and so up because they haven't got this yet. But yeah, failing can definitely be pretty fun. So that's what I got for you guys. Like I said, I want to try to keep that relatively short so that you guys have some time to ask questions, and I will try to give you as good of an answer as possible. But, you know, hopefully there was at least one takeaway that made it worth your while. Thanks again for your time, for your attention. And I'm open for questions. I don't know how you guys normally do questions. If you have somebody that kind of moderates and asks the questions, or if you just want to unmute yourself and ask questions, I'm good either way.
I'd be interested in hearing about a specific example of like maybe you having to learn about scope. I mean, I know specifically one for me that involved you. Uh, it was with I think one of our school projects that I did not pass because I aimed a little too high. But I would love to hear one from you.
Oh man, the most recent I would say um, was my thesis project for my graduate program. Oh my gosh, I thought, oh man, I've got all these crazy amazing artists with because our undergraduate art students work with our graduate game design students, and so we would partner with this school to have engineers. We would have our undergrads do all of our art, and I was like, man, I've got all these crazy talented people. I'm going to be able to do this crazy awesome thing. And so my initial kind of design, and I still have it, is this 7-chapter RPG, hand painted RPG based on Arthurian legend and this knight who was cursed and blah, 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 this, that, whatever. And I was like, oh, yeah, we can totally do, we might be able to finish a chapter or two, but I went ahead and designed out the full 7 chapters. And then what we ended up doing was literally the tutorial prototype that leads into the first chapter. So just the idea that I even had going in, like, oh, we've got a full year to do this. But yeah, just I totally overestimated how much effort and work the undergrads would be able to do based in, because I mean, you think, oh, like, oh, well, they have a couple classes, but they're good, they can do this, they're freaking awesome. But yeah, no, that was the last time that I just ridiculously overscoped something and just laughed at myself in the process. You were all there to witness part of that. Some of your classmates even worked on my thesis game. I had high school students working on my graduate program. I had taught them how to rig and animate. Hey, you're good enough to do this. Go get this character and make it work. But yeah, that was crazy. But I still do that sometimes. I still have a tendency to bite off more than I can chew here and there. And I'm 42 and I've been doing it for 20 years. So you guys, it's gonna be hard to grasp that. But I mean, every student project I think I've ever been involved in at any level has always grossly underestimated how big the project actually is. And sometimes you purposely let them fail because they're going to learn from that. And then other times you're like, oh no, that's just stupid. Stop, try again. But yeah, there's been a lot for sure.
I have a question. In your personal experience, do you think it is easier or harder to control scope in game jams, or like shorter, kind of shorter timeline projects like that?
I think it's way easier.
Yeah,
it's way easier because you have a better sense of what your actual resources are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know who your team is. You know how much time you have. You know what hardware and software you're going to be working with.
Yeah.
And so now it's just a matter of, okay, I have this theme that they've given me. Now I need to, come up with something that's going to be unique, right? I need that one unique feature that's going to make mine stand apart from everybody else's, hopefully, right? And then I think it's easier in one sense that you have all of those kind of lofty parameters that are the industry kind of in this little microcosm, but it's also challenging because you're trying to do something that's overly unique because it's a competition. Like I have to, and so you kind of push the boundaries. But that's within that 48 hours. Any of you have ever done a 48-hour game jam? Like you're constantly changing. Like, oh shit, that didn't work. Where are we going next? Like, I mean, it's a complete cluster for 48 hours straight.
Yeah.
And you've got these mentors running around and trying to help you. Like, what were you thinking? Like, so I mean, it's definitely still hard, but I think in the grand scheme of things, you're focused on such a small project that it definitely makes it easier. Now, some of those decisions are potentially harder because you almost have to be right. As when we're in the industry and we know we have 2 or 3 years to work on this thing. If we screw this little thing up, like, oh, well, we've got time to fix that. And oh, wait, if we need to postpone, guess what? We'll postpone if we can. Again, that kind of dives back into who are your stakeholders, right? Who's footing the bill? Who's the publishing company, so on and so forth. And some are a lot more lenient than others. those that have in-house publishing obviously can really manipulate what their variables are and how they go about it. But indie studios that have publishers kind of breathing down their neck, like, okay, we've extended this once already. Now it's time for you to be finished. It's and that point, that's when it kind of comes back to that minimal viable product, right? Or that minimum viable product, right? Like, okay, well, it's not done, but it's good enough to ship, Yeah. And that is, as sad and shitty as that is, that's the industry.
Yep. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. No, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think part of that comes back to, I mean, is this an individual project or is it a team project, right? Like, are you going to actually have friends working with you? Um, that comes back to that being with honest with yourself, right? And how much time do you have per week to actually dedicate to this project? Right? And not just you, but the other people working on it. And so everybody has to kind of balance their own schedules and their own classes and their homework load. And so then you have to think, okay, well, I might, like I said, with the industry, we can assume that you might get 5 solid production hours per day. And that's their full-time job, right? Like that is what they're paid to do. And they're only getting 5 hours per day. Um, and so, when you think about students, that have to, some of them have jobs. Some of them have, 16 or 18 hours, per semester that they're balancing this workload on top of an actual job. And now they're like trying to actually do some kind of indie hobby development. And so it's like, I mean, how many true hours do they have to actually put towards this project? And so at that point, again, kind of having that true sense of what resources do you have, right? Because time is your biggest resource. Like, I mean, that's just all there is to it. Yeah, the other things are important, budget, yada, yada, blah, blah. That's industry though. But if we're just talking about student projects, really the main staple of your resources is your time. And so how much time do you have to put forward? So it's hard to actually say, how long should it take, because every single member of your team is going to be a little different, right? If you have, let's say we have a team of 4, and one of you is kind of a phenomenal 2D graphic design type artist that's going to work with all the UI and all of that stuff. You've got one kind of 3D environment art person or character artist that's going to do the main characters, and then you've got a couple programmers that are going to take their art and do the implementation. You know the beginning of the project, that 3D artist isn't going to be really doing a whole lot except for just kind of conceptualizing characters. That 2D artist is going to be doing a little bit more because they're going to be working on, the screen mock-ups and what is the UI going to look like, and how is the actual player going to interface with this thing, whether it be on an actual computer screen or a mobile tablet or what. But the majority of the work at the beginning is going to be on those engineers trying to get the functionality. Does this thing work? Can we actually make it work? Or is this a piece of shit that we should just throw in the trash and move on to the next one, right? And so it's really hard to kind of guesstimate what that scope is going to be depending on, like, I mean, that's the first thing. I've got to know who am I working with and what are those skill sets? How are those skill sets going to complement each other, and how much time are we going to have? And then once you know that, you have this idea, right? And then it kind of goes back to, okay, we've got this idea. We want to make this mobile game, you know, okay, let's put it, I'll just grab one of my goofy little ideas that I always have in my head. I want to make this little, you know, co-op game where it's all about lights, and you know, you have these 2 or 3 different characters, and they're trying to move through this actual, you know, level, and no player can ever be in the light longer than, you know, a specific amount of time, but they also can't ever be further away, a certain distance away from either of their, you know, their co-op teammates either. And so they have to kind of strategically figure out how are they going to move through this environment, you know, and be constantly communicating with, you know, some of the lights are stagnant or static, and some of them are actually dynamic and moving. And so they have to figure out, how am I going to stay through the shadows, but how are we going to do it in a way where we can stay close enough to each other and time all of this movement around. And so, like, all of these things, now I have to go through the process of, oh my gosh, okay, what are all the different features? How am I going to get these different things to work? Is this going to be more of an actual, like, how am I even going to get the camera to look at this? Is this just going to be a straight top down, you know, flat map, or am I going to do more with a 3D environment, or, you know? And so now I have to really kind of, again, start figuring out, one, what's my MVP, and then also start putting together that product backlog. And that backlog is going to be a lot bigger than what I think it's going to be, right? When I actually start breaking this down and start thinking about the process, it's like, oh shit, now I've got to do this. Oh, damn, I didn't think about that either. But then one of your other teammates is going to say, oh, well, I'm going to have to do this. I'm like, oh crap, I didn't think about that either. And so it's just going to be this constant, you know, and so it's going to be hard. Like I said, it's almost impossible to truly get your scope under realistic, you know, until you just dive in and start prototyping. You want to plan out as much as you possibly can, and you'll get a decent idea on that plan how long that should probably take. But just know that you're probably going to have to add at least, maybe not half, but a quarter of whatever it was. So if you think, oh, this is going to take us about 6 months, it's probably going to take you about 7.5 or 8. You know, I mean, and that's being generous, right? And so so I mean, it's going to be, like I said, the more you do it, and the more that same team works together, that's what makes a huge thing. And that's why, you know, the most important thing to companies these days isn't how good you actually are. It's how do you fit their culture, right? Are you going to come in and actually be a good fit for the studio that they already currently have? Or are you just going to be this, you know, arrogant asshole that thinks that they know everything, and, you know, are going to be toxic in the environment? Because you're working so much with these people, and they don't want there to be turnover. They want you to come to Blizzard and stay at Blizzard, right? Because the longer you work with the same group, the better you are at determining how fast you can do things. And so that's, you know, that's the number one. So, I mean, you guys in college that are trying to get out into the industry now, you know, I think the most important thing I can tell you as far as portfolios of work is very strategically put your portfolio towards the studio you want to go to, right? And with programming, that's not as important as it is with art. But if I have an art portfolio and I send the same art portfolio to Insomniac that I just sent to Blizzard, they're both going to throw it out, because I'm not showing them that I can do what they do. I'm just showing them, oh, I'm a good artist. You know, like, no, they want you to see, like, Blizzard wants to see, if I want to be on the Overwatch team, they want to see all of those pieces, showing them that you can beat the shit out of the Overwatch style. Like, oh man, this is my jam. Or if I'm going to Insomniac, they want to see exactly how realistic can you make that, you know, texture, and make sure that, you know, you're going to be able to do, you know, the next Amazing Spider-Man game, and be able to knock it out with, you know, they don't need to teach you that. You know, they can, they have 80 artists applying for one role. You know, they get to choose, and so it's your art is going to get you into the interview. Your portfolio is going to get you into the interview, but who you are is what's going to decide whether you get the job or not. And always go in with lots of questions of your own. Ask cultural questions about the studio. But yeah, ask them questions because you need to know, right? Is this the right place that you want to end up? Because some of them aren't great. You know, there's some toxic studios out there. I'm not going to name any, but there's some toxic studios that you might not be a good fit for. So know that going into it. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
Do you have any examples of what kind of cultural questions to ask?
Just ask questions about their development process, or what type of let's see, you guys are showing. I was about to talk about family stuff. You guys don't have families yet, but think through what's important to you. Talk about you can ask specific questions about not necessarily how they do crunch, but what their work hours. What's a normal day for somebody in this role? What's their normal day look like? And so you're going to be able to kind of tell a lot. You're going to be able to kind of deduce a lot from how they answer that. Or you can talk about the production cycle in general, right? Ask them, who, if I'm a junior artist, if I'm a junior character artist, who. Where am I in the hierarchy? Who am I answering to, and who are they answering to? So on and so forth. So you can kind of get an idea of how that cultural works. Talk about, hopefully at some point, maybe you'll actually be able to go visit studios again. Right now, all the interviews are virtual, so you can't really even see anything, but also see how the studio is set up. Are they all just these big bullpens to where everybody's kind of collaborating and working together, and, or, is it set up to where everybody has their own little, space, and everybody's kind of, how do they set up their sprint teams in, you're going to be working with just the artist, or are you going to be working with the engineers and the UI artist and the other people, to where you guys can see your specific thing all functioning together? Like every studio, again, is going to be a little different. And then, just think about the things that are important to you, right? All of us have kind of priorities that are a little different as far as, what kind of people we want to work with, what kind of environment we want to work in. Some environments are all about, fun and play and woohoo, and we can do great things. And some are a little bit more serious. You go to some of those studios and they have their own cafeterias, and they have their own, game rooms and this and that. And that's great and wonderful. But when you really think about it, those are there because they don't want you to leave. They want you to stay there. And the more you're there, the more you're going to work. So is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I don't know. Everybody's a little different. And I guess it depends also on, where you are in your career. Starting out, sometimes you're going to have to take a kind of a crappy job as a stepping stone into something else. But always make sure you're advocating for yourself. Don't allow yourself to get completely taken advantage of. That culture is shifting. It's getting a lot better in the game industry, but some of it's still there. It's going to be, but it's changing a lot. It is. They've gotten a lot better over the last 6 or 7 years.
I was wondering, you talked earlier about how you'd rather have 100% of your game 75% done instead of 75% of your game 100% done, since it's easier to iterate and kind of patch and fix. And I was wondering if you had maybe an example of both, to kind of compare and contrast in a practical example.
Man, that's when I wish Don was here. Don or Dan, they could probably list off 50.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them have been working in the industry for longer than 20 years. But just think about it. If you look at any game, if it's only 75% done, how many features are missing, right? How many actual how much of your gameplay is actually not there? And so are you even going to resemble the user experience that you started out for? Not really. as opposed to I have 100% of the game here. It's done. Like you get the full experience. It might not be as pretty, right? And so, you know, instead of God of War, it's, I don't want to bash anything. And instead of being this amazing, beautiful experience, it's, it's good. And I mean, but is it, 65-inch 4K PS5 good? No, like, and so, but the feature, the functionality is there. The game experience is there, and that's what we're trying to do. We want to develop the experience, right? It's like, oh, hey, I have this horror game, but we only have 7 of the 9 levels done. Well, shit, what happens after that? Now, like, I didn't get to finish the storyline, damn it. And so that's just, it's I'd much rather you be able to finish the experience with less of the polish. And I mean, most of the last 6 months to a year is all refined and polished anyway. I mean, it's, oh, QA found another freaking bug. Now let's figure out how we're gonna fix that. And QA, it's hilarious. You can ask 10 different people and you'll get 10 different answers. QA is either the best job in the world or the absolute worst effing job in the world. On our last, I just sat in on a panel a couple of weeks ago that was talking to a local high school group out here. And one of our professors, who is an animator and rigger at Animal LLC right now, he started out in the industry as a QA tester. And then Don was on that same panel. He's, at Amazon. And he was just kind of bashing QA, this, that, whatever. Like, oh, that sucks. It's like the worst thing ever, Yeah, everybody thinks it's great. You get to go play games all day. But in all reality, you're not playing games all day. You're playing the same 5-minute level for 8 hours. And you're trying to recreate this one damn bug that you figured out a week ago, but if you can't recreate it, it doesn't exist. He's like, and you're taking notes and you're doing, and it just sucks. It's horrible. And then Eric's like, yeah, but it's so fun. It's just like, so everybody's gonna look at that stuff a little different. But I mean, that's the last 6 months to a year, depending on how big the project is all just gonna be QA bouncing something back. Oh, here's another bug. Damn it. Oh, here's another bug. And every game that's shipped, they know the bugs exist.
Yeah.
They know they're there. Like, and they know and sometimes they know they're on, like, Don even admitted multiple times where they would throw a bug back at him and he would jack with it for a day and say, yeah, it's done. No, it wasn't. It didn't. He didn't fix it. He just kind of like, oh yeah, it's good. We're good to go. That one's checked. But he knew when it shipped, like, oh, that bug's totally still there. But I mean, again, that's as crappy as that is. That's the industry. It's fun. It's frustrating. It's absolutely amazing and innovative, but also infuriating.
Yeah.
And god awful all at the same time. And if you're not just passionate about it, there's no reason to ever go into it.
Yep. Thank you.
I've got a question. So, what are do you have any tips on trying to improve estimating time to complete tasks? Like, kind of the joke / reality, at least for programmers, is like, gotta double your estimates and triple your estimates because, like, things could take a lot longer than you think, but that's not really realistic to do all the time, like double your estimates. So do you have any ideas on how to kind of like improve that skill?
Yeah, I mean, man, it's such a slippery slope. I think, if it's something that is really innovative, probably triple your time, to be honest with you. If it's something that has been done, maybe you haven't done it before, but it's been done, then I think you can you can probably guesstimate pretty closely. I think it's going to be this, and it's probably going to be at least 25% more than that. You might not necessarily have to double it, but it's also depending on, again, knowing your resources. If you know people that you can reach out to, that are way smarter than you, then that's going to help you estimate, because you'll be able to reach out to them. One of the examples I love to use, and Ashley might remember this. Rue, if Rue's still here, might actually remember this. We had a group that was creating a game for a project in class, and a brilliant programmer was working on it, and he was working on the same mechanic for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 days straight. And he's like, I just can't figure this out, it's driving me crazy. And he was just furious. And I was like, just hold that thought. And so I picked up a phone and called somebody that I know that's a developer in the industry. He's a ridiculously smart programmer. And it's like, hey, I don't want to bother you, but do you have a sec? He's like, well, I'm actually at the airport about to fly across the country, but I have like 20 minutes. So what do you got? You caught me at a good time. And I was like, I got a student. He's trying to do this, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, let me just hand the phone over to him. And so he's on the phone with James Finley, who's one of the owners at Broken Circle Studios. He's on the phone with James for 5 minutes, and the mechanic's working. And so if you have connections, if you have networks, if you have professors, right, that are just ridiculously smart, then that's going to help you kind of like, oh, I don't necessarily know how to do this, but I can talk to these people, and I'm probably going to be able to figure it out relatively quickly. And that's the thing. Don't be afraid to ask questions. To you guys, some of these people are like, oh my gosh, they're so and so, and they made this game. That's my favorite game, and you kind of almost turn into like a fanboy at the moment. You realize they're just people, right? I mean, they actually enjoy helping you guys. I'm more than happy. I'll have my information shared with you guys. But if at any point you guys need help with this or that or whatever, shoot me a message and I'll try to connect you with somebody. I mean, I've got tons of people that are happy to help out with student projects. We're having a game jam here in Southern California in a couple weeks. And, we've got mentors coming in from, Santa Monica and Insomniac and Blizzard and Riot and Obsidian. And, they're just happy to give an hour or two here or there and just, help you guys learn whatever they're doing. But yeah, I mean, it's going to take you a lot. It's not going to take them a lot. So if you can reach out, I mean, forums are absolutely amazing, especially for you programmers. Oh my God. Like, I mean, I've never seen a forum that wasn't just like completely over my head, because I know just enough programming to get myself in trouble and screw something up and then call somebody in to come help fix it. But yeah, I mean, if you're willing to kind of put your pride aside and let somebody much smarter and much more experienced come in and kind of help and give some feedback, then you can typically, guesstimate your time relatively easy. But if you're trying to do it on your own, then yeah, doubling your time, potentially even tripling your time, is actually probably pretty accurate, sadly. But yeah, I mean, if you're one of the younger students, then, reaching out to those older students and saying, hey, we're working on this project and I'm freaking running into this damn wall every time and I don't know how to do it. And then you get on a phone call and 5 minutes later, it's like, oh shit, that was easy. Why didn't I think about that? You sometimes you also have to step away. I know that's all the time. I also teach our level design class. And so, we're in Engine blocking stuff out and doing this and talking about compositions and districts and edges and nodes and this and that. And what are the key points that we're driving the player? How are we funneling them to that point, and so on and so forth. And you start noodling on things, and then you're like, what in the hell am I even doing? I need to take a break. And so you step back and you come back, and what you were just working on for an hour takes you 5 minutes to do because you have a fresh mind, So that's another thing that you guys, especially now, I mean, I don't know, is UT actually back on campus, or are y'all still online classes, or?
We're
we've been
mostly online, but there's some stuff that's coming back.
I got you. Yeah. I mean, like right now, you don't even separate life from work, from school. It's all the same damn room all day long, every day, and it's just absolutely obnoxious. And so, I mean, you've got to take time to step away and get a fresh mind. I've gotten to the point where I make myself go on 30-minute walks every day, just because I have to get out of the house and clear my head. But yeah, I mean, as far as kind of guesstimating your time programming wise, I'm not a whole lot of help because, like I said, I suck at programming. What would take me probably 5 hours, you could probably do in 20 minutes. I'm not lying. And so, I mean, art wise, I can speak to art all day long. Programming, it's a little bit of a completely different beast. But yeah, I mean, if it's something that's been done, it's something you've done, then obviously you're going to be able to guesstimate that a lot better. But again, if it's something more innovative, something you've never accomplished before, definitely give yourself a lot of more cushion. But again, main thing is reach out. If you find, as soon as you find yourself struggling, reach out to somebody. The more eyes you have on a problem, the sooner it's going to get fixed. A lot of studios have the rule that if you're working on the same thing, like if you're just kind of doing a problem solving, whatever, if you're working on the same thing for longer than a day, you're actually required to go to your lead and ask for help. Because, no problem should take longer than that. And, that's just because we do a lot of times like, no, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to, we let our pride kind of get in the way. Like, damn it, no, I have to tackle this problem. Like, no, you don't, because there's other people involved. You need to make sure that you're being as efficient as possible, because that's the name of game design, is being efficient. Even though we're horribly efficient in most of everything we do. We're attempting to be more efficient. We're just not very good at it. I hope that answered your question. I know it was kind of all over the place, but not really. But yeah.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
All right.
Anyone have any last questions before we wrap up? See if there's anything.
Good deal. Good deal. I think somebody asked earlier back in the presentation, what's the difference between a backlog and asset list? In its most basic sense, not a lot. The backlog is going to cover more than just the asset list, though. Like, asset list is more for art side, like what are all the different assets we need to create. The backlog is literally covering everything, like the entire production process. And so it's going to cover a lot more than just a typical, stereotypical standard asset list. Those are the main kind of differences. I think more of an asset list as, oh, we've got to have these props for this room. We've got to have these environments, set up to here. We've got to have this number of foliage so that we can, or, we're going to create these, handful of trees, so then we can procedurally generate them through the level, and they're going to be scattered enough to where it doesn't look like we reused assets, even though every game ever known to man has reused assets. Modular design is your friend. Make sure you're good at modular design. But yeah, asset list is going to be more speaking specifically to the art team, whereas the backlog is the entire development team. But backlogs are hard to do, especially for students. Y'all like to just jump in and go. I've been teaching for 20 some odd years, and most of the time when I look at student backlogs, I laugh because I'm like, this isn't a backlog. This is like the most bare bone list of bullshit you could come up with just so you could get a green stamp to start working. But yeah, so definitely get into it. Definitely, like I said, the more you plan ahead of time, the smoother it will be. You will still run into bumps. They will still happen, but you will be better prepared to handle it. So good deal. Well, thanks again for having me. It was a pleasure to come talk to you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very much so.
Thank you.
All right, you guys have a great time. Enjoy your spring break next week. Push through midterms. It's going to be a shitty week, but next week's going to be great.
I'm sure we'll all do our best. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Looking forward to it.